Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today we have our special guest, Mr. Charley Rattan. So welcome, Charley.
Hiya.
And all the way from England, so we appreciate that. Now you are with Charley Rattan Associates, your own company, and you're an expert in hydrogen, offshore wind, and impact investing, which I'm very curious about impact investing, especially in Africa. So could you please tell us, what you're up to?
Yeah, it's a very busy time. I thank you for your kind words there, Wendy. It's something that's organically grown out of my interest in training. I trained in recent years on offshore wind, on hydrogen, including in the United States and Canada, for example, BOEM in the United States. And they're very interested in future developments for renewable energy, especially offshore wind. So the training side gets you in front of some key people in the world, as you would imagine, and they always want more. They want further advice. They want to know the next thing, the next innovation, and obviously hydrogen plays highly into that. There are big synergies between the green dynamic of offshore wind and some of the opportunities around green hydrogen. So, a result of my organic approach, it means that I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to places such as Grimsby fish docks or local entrepreneurs or people with ideas, many of them weird and wonderful, but some of them very interesting indeed. And more recently, I've been lucky enough to be invited to congresses, the World Hydrogen Congress, and to the City of London, lucky enough to moderate sessions there. And they took the view, look, we were instrumental in the 1970s in the UK. We didn't have an oil and gas industry, but we made it happen, or we helped make it happen. We are the insurance industry, or we're the City of London. And we want to make the next industrial revolution happen. We get the green agenda. We get the need for decarbonisation. We're here. We're ready. We know how to deliver major projects. We know how to deliver scary things. Offshore, North Sea is quite challenging. And we want to do it again. And so I suppose it was a logical conclusion, wasn't it? Given the fact that I'm already talking to entrepreneurs, to startups, to people in the field with ideas. And I'm also talking to the City of London and the financiers. That I sit in the middle and say, well, have you talked to them? What about the next step here? Have you got your IP nailed up? What about your patents? Who do you want to go to next? And so it's an area I can add a bit of value to. And increasingly, it's an increasing part of my company's business, a very organic step forward from just pure teaching.
So when you mentioned entrepreneurs and startups, I'm a huge fan of those groups because they are actually thinking outside the box. They're coming up with new ideas people haven't really thought of before, or taking existing ideas and making them better. And you've always supported a global transition to a low carbon economy. Could you explain why it's not a no carbon economy and what that difference is?
Yeah, well, I'm green through and through, Wendy. I started off as a volunteer for wind, which isn't universally acclaimed, certainly the onshore variety, but I do it because I believe in it. And sometimes there were challenges, certainly when you work in a company such as Shell, which I did for many years. They share some of it, but not all of the agenda. I suppose the reason I also encompass low carbon is that there is a place for that too. For example, you might claim that pyrolysis, which is a very high temperature form of hydrogen production, now that might suit something like the recycling of plastic waste, for example. So plastic waste, a real problem, certainly here in the UK. And you've got something that can, techniques that can give a real pure form of hydrogen, 99.9995% pure hydrogen can be created from that pyrolysis prospect. But that is not green. That is, you might say, the lowest of low carbon, which I support. But if you were to say, is it renewable? Well, probably not. But it is addressing a need. And so that's probably why. That's an example of why I would widen my scope from being pure green to very low carbon as well. There are other synergies between the two, and there are some reality checks as well where the two intertwine as well. If you want to be serious about this, you're serious. We're talking about project delivery rather than fancy theoretical constructs, which might sound lovely and pure, but I'm also about major projects, mega projects, giga projects, getting them away, doing it safely and making a return for investors. We do live in a society which is a capitalist society here in the UK, and we have to be mindful of the realities of keeping stakeholders happy, keeping people engaged, giving the workforce a future, making sure that towns and cities are sustainable. That is a route, and you want to bring them in. You don't want to become adversarial, thinking sometimes it's blue versus green, or it's heat pumps versus grid hydrogen. It's not always the case. So that's really why it's low carbon. It's a reality. If we are going to decarbonize, certainly hard to abate industries, steel, cement, porcelain, concrete, then you need to think about decarbonizing as much through a blue future as through the pure green, which obviously, as I indicated, was my motivation, remains my motivation, but it's aligned with that low carbon aspect as well.
So Charley, you know, I don't know how it works overseas, but what about carbon credits? Do you guys operate in carbon credits?
Yeah, there are various mechanisms to support the green agenda. We have had that. We've had a number of supports here in the UK, ranging from a renewable obligation certificate. It's been amended to a floor price now. It's called a contract for difference. Carbon taxes and carbon credits are other mechanisms. Different countries favour different supports. And we did get the carbon credits for part of the ROC as well. And that was a good motivation. It got utilities moving. They may or may not have been inclined to change, but I think that focused the mind. Certainly, if you can get a credit for producing in a green manner, that is an incentive, and it incentivized the utilities. And I suspect that that will be a major part of incentivization in Europe going forward, that perhaps you can offset it against tax, get some uplift, get a physical remuneration. Who knows what mechanism? And the one, of course, the downside is people also talk about carbon credits. There are also some debate about carbon taxes. Taxes are not universally acclaimed, certainly not by politicians that have to explain to people why there's a carbon tax. But I also see that obviously the energy transition has to be paid for. And like any bill, it often comes to people like you and I at the end of the day. So that's something that we must face as an industry and be honest about it. But the carbon credits and the carbon tax ideas might then go into a pot and then be redistributed to ease and socialize that pain as well. So carbon credits, absolutely, and along with a whole heap of other mechanisms as well, depending on the region, the country, and the aspirations. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny when you mentioned the capitalism, Joel did his patented eye roll, because we are defined by finance. No one's going to make a change unless they get money out of it. And I'm glad that you mentioned the benefit of stakeholders versus shareholders. So to clarify that for people who don't understand, shareholder, obviously an investor, they want a financial return. Stakeholders, the rest of us. It's the community. It's everybody. It's, you know, are we getting our lungs filled with pollutants? Are we living a better life? So well, that's our shift in focus.
It's a great point, Wendy. Just this very afternoon here in the UK, I've been talking to two groups, both on your side of the pond. One is with BOEM, a task force is sitting as we speak, and I will be resuming it after this thing. And that's comprised of stakeholders, ranging from local government to environmentalists to tribal kind of representatives, a whole heap of stakeholders. And of course, they've got a voice. My second call of the day was to more of a financial company saying, hey, Charlie, you're on the cutting edge. You talk to a lot of small startups. You talk to a lot of portfolio players. We have got the investment, but it has to be robust. We can't be chasing things that are not going to be stacking up. There will be a financial close. There will be a financial investment decision, and there will be sums. And we can't just be drifting. We have to keep it to KPIs, to milestones, and all those things you would expect from project rigor. I'd like to combine the best of capitalism, if you like, which is project rigor, governance, finance, how to deliver things safely, corporate social responsibility, with the best that the startups and the entrepreneurs can offer. Obviously, very enthused about the what they're doing. Sometimes, do they always see the bigger picture? Are they aware of the realities of financial close, the grey hairs that you see upon my head? Probably the result of it. It's hard to go through a financial close, and as long as we're upfront and honest and say, look, sooner or later there will be a moment of truth. It's not me, is it? Yeah. You know, I'm just saying because I come from a green background. So it has to be rigorous and it has to be robust. Otherwise, the financiers will, and they are stakeholders as well, will walk away, and that would be a real tragedy. And that's for many, many parts of the world. It's not just a case of throwing largesse. However, well-meaning projects, they have to be robust, scalable, all the things. Is the IP nailed up? Is it robust? If not, they'll walk away, and that'll be a tragedy.
Well, speaking of which, Charlie, there's been so much talk and so many people who claim to be doing impact investing in Africa. Yeah. And I know firsthand how difficult, projects in Africa can be, whether it's wind, solar, even just potable water. What are you seeing going on in that part of the world?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the resource is fabulous, isn't it? Certainly for renewables and green. You look at the solar resource, the irradiation. You look at the wind resource. You look at places such as Mauritania and Namibia. I talk to a lot. They've both got really promising trajectories for offshore wind and hydrogen. The resource is fabulous. They've got technologies that would really aid that. I think there are positive signs, Joy, moving into into that field. In that I also support organisations such as UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, that certainly get the bigger picture. Now, I'm not saying that UNIDO is going to solve the problems, but it can perhaps have a role as an honest broker, in that they've got boots on the ground, they are familiar with local realities, but they can also open the doors as well. And I've seen similar trajectories with organisations here in the UK, quite close to our Department of International Trade. That's pivoting. Traditionally, I might have said it was a mechanism to support fossil growth and expansion throughout the globe, but used to do that through our embassies. But that's pivoting as well. They get the green agenda, and they're now saying, well, we've got to support renewables. We've got to support things like you were talking about, green hydrogen, green offshore wind. And so if you were to combine the two, our offshore, our overseas elements in the Department of International Trade, the chambers of commerce that sit below it, and the embassies that are aligned with it, along with organizations, global organizations. COP26 was very much a United Nations event with UNIDO pivotal in it. Then there are opportunities for hope, because they can open doors for people. I'm not saying they're a magic wand, but they can remove some of the blockers in certain places such as Africa, which have been challenging, have not necessarily been 100% success, have the major developments in Africa in the last 50 or so years. Some have not, a mixed bag. Yeah.
So when you mentioned COP, go ahead, Joel, go ahead. No, go.
All right, I'm just going to have a little fun here. So when you mention offshore wind, I just want to clarify a couple things. One, windmills do not cause cancer.
So could you repeat the question?
They're not going to kill a lot of birds.
You cite them away from migration routes. It's the first thing you do as a responsible developer. I think there's a danger of taking the NIMBY narrative as the reality. The first thing you would do as a responsible developer is look at the constraints. I've just been, and still am, involved in the BOEM kind of narrative for the Atlantic coast. And the first thing they do is look at the major risks, and birds are very, very top of that. Historically, it's not always been the case. Some of the early ones were crudely sited, certainly in California, and that's led to a bad impression. But that doesn't mean the technology doesn't work. It means that the siting was crude, and we've learned a lot since. So the first thing you would always do as a responsible developer is look at the environmental constraints and then rule it in or out. And that de-risking is increasingly being done at government level. So we as developers only come in after it's been significantly de-risked. I'm thinking of the Crown Estate here in the UK, the sister organisation BOEM in DC. They will de-risk it by talking to stakeholders, environmental stakeholders, and the birds at the very top of that, before it even comes to leasing. So it's de-risked at a very early stage.
But when it comes to the general public, there's a lot of misinformation, and there's been certain people who have said certain comments which are kind of far-fetched, to put it nicely. Whether windmills causing cancer or these could be a blight on the coastline for the view. How do you combat that?
Yeah, well, you stick to the truth, don't you? I mean, there are all kinds of agendas. Some of it is malicious. Some of it, we had some people flying across in Scotland, some very high-profile people that had golf courses and all kinds of things that weren't aligned with the renewable agenda. And of course, you've got vested interests that will promote untruth. So you do it well, you do it responsibly, like any major project. You will stick to it, and you have to be mindful of that. I'm not saying there've not been examples that would give opponents some fuel. And there have been examples of turbines falling over and migrate and bird casualties, of course. So the thing is then to take all the information and get the stakeholders around the table early. So you de-risk it early. So you might go to the bird fraternity and saying, look, which sites they might not be dancing for joy, but which sites would be more comfortable with? Which ones are absolute no-no from your point of view? Similar with the fishermen and other stakeholder groups. We share this planet. The fishermen don't own the sea, but they've got a right. It's their livelihoods. They've got certainly a voice. So we'll work in tandem with it, just as you would as a good neighbour. You share it with them. And if you share the best practice and share the best principles, then you'll have a more robust project and you'll have happier people. So there's no point antagonising people as a developer. You'd like to think, well, you could offer the fishermen, perhaps in UK, many fishermen have converted to becoming skippers of CTVs, the crew transfer vessels. Fishing was decaying in many parts of the east coast of the UK. The port of Grimsby has been transformed through hosting offshore wind. So it's been a great news story. The mayor of Grimsby stands up and says it's been transformational for our town. And so I think there'll be similar examples on the coasts of America as well. In fact, I know they are, because people are queuing up to get involved. But let's not forget, there are real issues to be mindful of, real constraints, and let's do it well. We want to do it the right way. We are all about the ecology. We're all about sustainability. The last thing we want to do is reduce that for our children. So we must be very careful to present a better future and a better environmental future than exists at the moment. And that is baked into best practice. Some of the things that are said out there are a bit malicious and amplified by elements of the press who are not always convivial to our industry. They're not always supporters of renewables, far from it.
We are a little behind in the States. I'm fully admit it. We took a little nap for about 4 years, but we're awake now. We're back.
I'm not going to comment on that.
And now we're rushing to get all of our stuff taken care of to be net zero by 2035, which is not that far away. So it was stop and then hurry up and run. So
I mean the good news is that sometimes delay can help you. Certainly I've come across projects which, if they'd been straight trajectory, would have been less good than a couple of years delay. I'm thinking of Seagreen in Scotland, where the technology has really improved, and the delay, although it was painful at the time, a far better scheme will be built out as a result. And sometimes, certainly I'm talking, as I say, to Boehm on the other line, if you like. They've got a 30 gigawatts by 2030 build out now in the United States, and new technologies, including, ironically, some that have benefited during that delay, will help deliver that. So yes, I agree that it's frustrating, but it's sometimes you can benefit as well. If you keep a cool head, see the bigger picture, you can catch up and even overtake some of the things that we've learned, sometimes hard, on this side of the Atlantic.
Not hard lessons, but I wanted to circle back because you do investing, impact investing primarily. There's a lot of greenwashers out there, a lot of people claiming certain things that aren't entirely true. Maybe it's unintentional greenwashing is what I like to think. What should people avoid?
Well, you might want to look. I mean, I would certainly look, if I was investing, I would look at the history of the company, whether it aligns with the philosophy. I'd look at the philosophy. I'd look at the corporate social responsibility element of the company. Just about all companies in the UK have them, but I'm not saying that all do. You might want to look at the history of those involved. You might want to then do a little bit of further due diligence and see where they want to be in a few years' time, what the commitment to the green agenda or the low carbon agenda might be, and those might be simple high-level questions to ask before you decided to do that. And that's increasingly happening. It's not just talk. The pension funds are increasingly getting it. I've mentioned our Department of International Trade, and the City of London gets it as well. They absolutely get the low carbon future. So I think the cost of money for fossils is going to increase. Shale, fracking, oil, gas, all of those, the sunset industries, whether they can fight the Canute-like last battles, but ultimately the episteme or the mindset of the modern generation is moving people away, and they're getting it. They do get the big picture. So the CEOs, and if you think people like the City of London get it, they've not always been known for being ahead of the curve, public opinion-wise. Then it's a good news story.
That's fantastic. So as we close out, because we're running to our 20 minutes, how can people find you? You offer a myriad of services. Your website, which is charleyrattan.com.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough. I was planting a bit of a lawn furrow 3 or 4 years ago when nobody was really interested in hydrogen, apart from a few people like me. But it was like a little echo chamber at times. But that's no longer the case. Everybody is now aware of the hydrogen agenda. They can find me. They can use Mr. Google, and it won't take long to get some kind of contact details should they so wish. I'm having to expand. I'm no longer. I'm now the associates and bringing people that I know can help deliver projects and due diligence and all the other things that we talked about. It's no longer just one person. It's somebody just heading up and dipping in and out at the key moments, making sure that the quality is what blue chip investors would expect, making sure that what I've promised is delivered, and making sure that people are happy with the Charley Rattan Associates product. And I learn from people telling me. The brokerage came from people asking for it, not from me thinking I'm the world's best broker. I've not got a history. I've not got a 20-year history in the City of London. But I do know that if I'm talking to people with projects and that I'm talking to financiers, it doesn't take much to say, well, have you talked to this group or have you considered that? And then suddenly you're there. And it's a very organic movement for me.
Well, I mean, your knowledge background is gigantic, and 25 years of hands-on experience, very few people have. So you do have sort of an edge over most.
Yeah, it's been good when obviously there's some fancy titled people with fancy organizations that have often come to me for my training, but I don't plaster that everywhere. They come to me for training on ammonia, on hydrogen, on offshore wind and hydrogen, and then you stay in contact with them, and then and you learn from them as well. It's a two-way process. That I've shown them perhaps the basics of where we are with offshore wind or floating wind and hydrogen, and they share with me other things that they learn. No one person, I think, can know it all, but if you've got a curious mind and want to learn and want to promote in a low carbon and green manner, then it's a good place to be.
And collaboration is pretty much all we got. I mean, we're all heading in the same direction.
We're talking here. I've never had the pleasure of meeting you, and I'm certainly not next door to you. But the technology that we're using it enables something approximating a real-time collaboration, doesn't it? And as I said this afternoon, I've talked with financiers on your side of the Atlantic, and I will be rejoining the task force meeting on your side of the Atlantic. So in some ways, collaboration has never been easier. And some of it has come from a bad reason for the pandemic, and yet people have now seen the technology works, and we can kick on and really collaborate very effectively, almost in real time. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, ESJ was born out of the pandemic. I grabbed Joy and Joel, and I'm like, let's just do this, and just set everything up, and we just started talking to people. And it's communication, outreach, education. It's all we got. Exactly. We all are heading in the same direction. So on that, I thank you so much for your time. We will definitely have you back. I believe we have you scheduled for a couple months from now to talk about other technologies you're working on. And I thank you. This is huge. This is amazing knowledge, and I really do appreciate your time today.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.